All right, it's about time we tear that ass up on realhistorywww.com. It's a black history promoting site, very Afrocentric and extremely racist, insightful, and extremely uneducated. And you can tell definitely through just seeing something simple like this, their geared narrative and how diluted they are and how simply it can be debunked. But yet they've got it all written out for the black people to just fall in like a dumb stupor. Um, so let's tear that ass up, shall we? They say, ever since their ascension some 200 years ago, yes, in spite of all that they have taught, it's only been about 200 years. The Dravidian albinos of Europe, formerly of India via Central Asia, had busied themselves creating fake artifacts and writings to support their imagined fantasy history. And when the opportunity arose to establish their dominance over the normal world of humans by violence and genocide, they greedily took it. Then, after gaining dominance over the normal world of humans, they went about the task of using their total control over media and all types of communication to teach and spread their false fantasy history. The main object of their revisionist history were their former masters in Europe, the black elite. These simply wrote out of history and attempted to destroy all their artifacts, at the same time writing themselves into their places and creating fake artifacts to support their lie with Europe's black elite. I'm sorry, out of the way. Then it was easy, with the help of brain dead African leaders, to establish black skin as synonymous with slaves and underachievement. Okay, let's just touch upon a couple of things here. I have to. Ever since their ascension 200 years ago, no. We've got a rich history that goes back to recorded time and then far before. So 200 years now. Dravidian albinos. So this idiot that writes this article actually thinks that Caucasians are Dravidians, which is one of the nomenclatures. You have a Dravidian, you have a Mongoloid Asian, you have a Caucasian, you have a Negroid. And these people that are talking this crap are Negroids. And they're saying that Albino Dravidians came in and took over Europe. And so they show an albino family that has a genetic problem over here in Pakistan. And then he says the normal family members are in the rear. Well, it's great if these people are actually related to them. And you know, Pakistani peoples are Caucasians, right? Okay, so that's about as stupid as anybody could get. But yet, the stupidest statement is this man thinks that all white people and all Caucasians are albinos. So, in other words, all Asians, all Russians, all Arabic people, all of the Mediterranean people, all of the European people, all of the English, British, UK, everybody is apparently just albinos to this idiot, which is actually a genetic disorder. Let's just see real quick for a moment what causes albinism. Well, if you just look, albinos have almost reddish eyes and things, and it's a genetic disorder. And sometimes people with white hair and skin and often reddish eyes are being mutilated and murdered for their body parts in Tanzania. According to the New York Times, sometimes as family members look on in horror, groups of machete-wielding men have chopped off the legs, heads, and genitals of albinos. Among the dead are a 7-month-old baby, a cassava farmer with 2 children, and a child murdered by his own father, according to reports by the BBC. The brutal killings, 40 of them since 2007, that have been documented, could be lots more, are fueled by rumors that albino blood, skin, and hair have magical powers. And this stems back from whenever all the church people would go down and try it as missionaries, and they quite often ended up being eaten as albinos. And everybody thinks, oh, that's kind of bullshit story. No, it's documented. And they thought that they would get the magical powers that the white man had because they didn't. You know, they're a pre-Stone Age, illiterate, primitive, dung hut dwelling people at best. And so they have these issues and this mentality that, wow, those people know how to make fire real easy and everything. Maybe I can gain his white power by eating him. And it still goes on to this day, people, because they haven't been domesticated like the other places that have been colonized. So they believe that they have magical powers. People are actually weaving albino hair into their fishing nets and fashioning amulets with albino body parts, hoping that these devices will bring them riches. The Time reports in the story profiling Canadian albino Peter Ash, founder of the Same Sun, an albinism advocacy organization aimed at shaming the Tanzanian government into stopping these murders because no one else is even trying to stop it. Anyhow, what causes albinism? Well, it's a disease, kind of genetic disorder, in which a person has partial or complete loss of pigmentism, or pigmenting at all, or the melanin in their skin, the ability to tan, and things like that. People that are redheaded and freckled are not albinos. Albinos are somebody that has a lack of pigment. And if you'll read here what it's saying below this and what causes this with all these long ass words, it basically tells you that they have skin that does not react with the sun and tan itself up. And so, anyhow, these albinos is a rare genetic disorder, but it actually happens 17 people out of a million, I think, is the way it works out. And that's up in Northern Europe where you have all the light-skinned people. It actually happens to 1 in 17,000 or something out of certain parts of Negroid areas that have been had a bad gene pool, and you end up having sex with your second cousin and things. Not really a direct incest type thing, but people that aren't far enough away from you genetically and then not having. And it happens from being tribal and things like that a lot. But so let's just go back to this idiot here and continue on. So that's what he thinks happens and stuff. And hey, is that what happened here? Who knows if they got with their second cousin? And that doesn't mean a goddamn thing to the other billions of white people on the planet that aren't albinos. What a fool that this guy could be. So with their newfound power over the world's knowledge databases of the European albinos, thought it might appropriate to establish a racial uniqueness and exclusivity for themselves. Thus, by their telling, only they had straight hair, bridge noses, thin lips, straight hair, blue-colored eyes, blonde-colored hair, and white skin. Okay, well, you're talking about Northern European Caucasians, but sure, but there's a lot that have dark features, like, hey, tall, dark, and handsome, and that's not a Negroid. That's somebody that has darker features and everything, thicker eyebrows and stuff, and you know damn well what I'm talking about. The classic vampire doesn't look good as being a blonde. He's tall, dark, and handsome, and that guy's about as pale as you can get. Anyhow, the last three being classic indicators of albinism. So in fact, they're trying to establish albinism as normal to humans. Albinism isn't normal to humans. It's a genetic defect that Negroids have worse than white people. And they also want to eat the people to see if they can get whitey magic. Albinism is, of course, caused by the defective P gene, and it's hereditary. Thus, two albinos mating can only produce other albinos. No, idiot, that's not true. It's true that generally when you get an albino, both parents have an albino carrying trait, but yet aren't albinos themselves, just like parents can have a midget. These are both genetic defects, and it's nothing to do with the fact of it. And whenever you have a black person that's an albino and they have kids and they're still a black negroid albino, they don't all of a sudden turn into a white person. How foolish of a narrative these people put out. So, blacks and mulatto, pigmented whites. Whites don't have black genes in them at all. A lot of negroids have white genes from the slave trade, which has made them lighter, but that's not the truth of the way that statement can even come out of somebody's mouth and be logical. But so they have defective P genes, so that whenever they mate with another carrier or an albino, they'll produce an albino. Well, how do black people produce an albino then whenever they're both black? He's just gonna say stupid shit here, I guess. When albinos mate with normal people, the effects of albinism are mitigated, and assuming with other complexion, the offspring will be the same. Well, this guy's just some kind of geneticist now, huh, and shit. So then they want to always show this picture that everybody's seen 1,000 times, and whenever black people have blue eyes or green eyes or yellowish eyes, it's actually a genetic defect again. And it's whenever they have a fatty deposit in their iris, and it's actually a problem for them and not a good thing at all. These people aren't related to sub-Saharan negroids, and this guy's so admixed it'd make your head spin. So what if they pull an amelanistic form out of a black man? There's very few times it happens, but here you go where you get a high yellow somehow. Is that kid's hair bleached? What's he trying to just... How foolish some of this shit is. Now he says, by their own science, the albinos knew that all modern humans were of African origin. Of course, North Africa has always been Caucasian, and the out of Africa theory was about how they had probably started out there and then spread out. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with Negroids in the first place. They were the people that never did go out of Africa. So, and humans are of African origin and thus black-skinned. Well, here they go thinking everybody in Africa is black-skinned whenever Egypt's not, South's not, and the Cape area around the Point and the Horn isn't. In fact, wasn't. The old Hofmeyr stuff will show you that Caucasians were there 40,000 years ago. And so the whole apartheid thing is probably okay because they built a fence whenever the Negroids started coming up and trying to mooch off of them, just like the Egyptians kind of did whenever they had Nubians trying to mooch off of them that could have gone anywhere in Africa, but instead decided to stay and mooch. Kind of like the black people in America that were supposed to go back to Liberia, which was a country totally set up for them, and instead they decided to stay and mooch, with like 64% of the people that are on welfare out of 10 races of people or subsets. They're 64% of it. And yeah, 72% of black families being single mothers, and those, of course, we're really eating up that number. Anyhow, so where were we at? Explain away their white skin by saying that they gradually turned white in Europe in order to better absorb the weak sunlight in Europe and thus their body's production of vitamin D. No, and he goes on to say the problem with this lie. Well, yeah, that's a lie. People that were living in Iceland and things and don't have a problem like that at all either, but yet the Scandinavians and the more north seem to be a little bit lighter. But what ruins that is the whole thing about Eskimos and how they have a darker skin to be able to absorb sunlight and get it better and get fish. You can tell this isn't exactly where people came from now, was it? But black people didn't come from any of these places. They came from sub-Saharan West Africa, and only that. So, we've got Whitey in the bottom now with Hofmeyr. We've got it all up the East Coast. We've got it in Egypt, which is all up the East Quarter, and then all across the north of it. It's some 60% that would have been Caucasian. So, Really don't want to hear any bullshit. Out of Africa meant the whites that came out of Africa and did stuff like made humanity and built megalithic stonework. You go down into Negroid Africa and there's none of these things, not even in a good mocking form to this day. So, problem with this lie is that through human time in Europe, there are artifacts of black Africans who retain all their African features and color throughout history. Not only that, their studies have confirmed that blacks absorb UV rays better and produce and store vitamin D more effectively than albinos without damage to the skin. Well, that just makes sense on the Ice Age thing, and they were trapped in West Africa during the Ice Age, and so pretty much went through that, and it would have been better for them. But yet, if they don't get enough sun, they get rickets and all kinds of problems. But yet, Caucasians don't because they have magic adaptable melanin that produce the store of vitamin C. Gullible Negroes, beware of the nonsense that these people tell you. One of the many functions of vitamin D is to control calcium and content in our bones. Black people all over the world have a density 20% greater than albinos, and thus their lies are debunked by common knowledge. It's hard to get a black person to swim. They're so heavy. If they don't have enough body fat on them, they almost can't float. Negroids have never made a boat in their life. Their bones are dense because they're like Cro-Magnons, and those bones were more dense too. We don't need that anymore. We're working towards intelligent things. People are going Zoom. Whitey people can fly now in his magic metal bird. Well, black people can run fast. Whitey can go past that in his bike. But now he hooks up a motor to it, and without even exerting himself, zoom. Tell us that nature does not create deficiencies. Many European albinos can barely tolerate an hour in the sun before sunburn sets in. That's odd. There are Caucasians all around the world around the equator and 24/7, 365. And so that's, again, just a foolish, foolish comment.